moved into an old apartment building downtown, the kind with creaky wooden floors and chipped paint on the walls. The rent was cheap, and it had this strange charm that drew me in. Plus, it was close to work. The previous tenant had left in a hurry, according to the landlord, but that didn't bother me. People come and go all the time. A week after settling in, I started noticing small things out of place. A chair slightly moved, a book not where I left it. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness. But then, things began escalating. My keys would vanish, only to reappear in the most unlikely places, like inside the sugar jar or on top of the refrigerator. It was weird, but I tried not to dwell on it. Then, it got more unsettling. One night, I found my refrigerator moved out from the wall, a feat that would have taken considerable effort. The kitchen chairs were rearranged in a neat line, facing the window. I felt a chill run down my spine. It was like someone was playing a prank on me, but I was the only one with a key to the apartment. I began double-checking the locks, convinced someone must be sneaking in. But nothing changed. The strange occurrences continued. One morning, I woke up to find all the furniture in the living room pushed to one side. Another time, I discovered my clothes had been taken out of the closet and arranged in a circle on the floor. It was unsettling, to say the least. As time went on, I started feeling like I was losing my grip on reality. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of whispering, but there was never anyone there. The whispers were so faint, I could never make out the words, and they always stopped the moment I turned on the light. I began to doubt myself, wondering if I was imagining things, or if someone or something was in the apartment with me. I told a friend about it, and they joked that maybe the place was haunted. I laughed it off, but the idea lodged in my mind. I started noticing other things, like cold spots in the apartment and strange drafts, even when all the windows were closed. I'd hear faint footsteps, but no one was ever there. The final straw came when I woke up to find my bed moved halfway across the room. It felt like a violation, a reminder that something was messing with me in my own space. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't afford to move, and there was no one to talk to about it without sounding crazy. I eventually moved out, but the experience left a mark. To this day, I wonder if there really was something in that apartment, something playing tricks on me, or if I was just losing my mind. I never found out what was causing those disturbances, but sometimes I still think about that place and the strange things that happened there. I had finally signed the lease on my dream apartment. I was so excited about the character and charm, especially because it was on 3rd floor. For some reason, I've always slept better when higher up. I had joked with friends how I was destined to live in a treehouse or something. It had large windows and high ceilings, a decent view, perfect for my new life in new town. But not long after I settled in, I started noticing something off. At night, as I lay in bed, I would see shadows moving across the walls. At first, I thought they were reflections from the streetlights or passing cars, but the shadows moved in odd ways, shifting and swirling as if they had a life of their own. I tried to ignore them, but they were impossible to overlook. I started sleeping with the lights on, hiding under my covers like a child. It was silly, but the shadows unnerved me. They seemed to gather in the corners of the room, watching and waiting. And then there were the marks. I'd wake up with strange, faint bruises and scratches on my arms, like someone had gripped me tightly or scratched me in the night. They weren't painful, but they were unsettling. I had no pets, and I slept alone, so I couldn't explain how they got there. I began to feel trapped in my own apartment, terrified to sleep, but exhausted from the lack of rest. The shadows felt more menacing as the nights went on, like they were creeping closer. I even tried talking to them one night, desperate for some kind of explanation. But of course, nothing happened. The shadows just danced silently, mocking me. One night, the footsteps started. They were faint at first, like someone walking down the hall. But as I lay there, frozen in fear, they grew louder, stopping right outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock or some sign of who or what was out there. But nothing happened. The footsteps continued, pacing back and forth, never entering the apartment, but never leaving either. I started asking my neighbors if they had noticed anything strange, but no one seemed to know what I was talking about. They all said the building was quiet and peaceful. I even spoke to the building manager, who mentioned that the third floor used to be part of a hospital wing, back when the building was a sanatorium in the early 20th century. Many patients had died there, and the floor had been repurposed over the years. That revelation only made things worse. I began to wonder if the shadows and marks were somehow connected to the building's past, to the souls who had once walked its halls. The idea terrified me, and I knew I couldn't stay. I broke my lease and moved out as soon as I could. I still think about that apartment sometimes, especially the shadows and the marks. I never figured out what was happening, and I never went back to find out. Part of me is relieved, but another part wonders if I was just imagining things. All I know is that I've never felt truly alone since, like something from that place followed me, lingering just out of sight. I found my attic apartment charming, with its slanted ceilings and exposed wooden beams. It had a cozy feel, perfect for an artist like me. The building was old, and the landlord mentioned that the attic space above my unit was sealed off, unused for decades. I didn't think much of it, focused instead on settling into my new space. About a week into settling in, I heard faint whispers late at night, like a distant conversation just beyond my hearing. I assumed it was the building settling, or maybe even my neighbors. But the whispers grew more distinct, though I could never make out the words. One night, driven by curiosity and a touch of bravery, I decided to explore the extra attic space adjacent to my apartment. I found the hatch and, with some effort, managed to open it. The air that greeted me was stale and cold, like a long-forgotten tomb. Armed with a flashlight, I climbed up, my breath misting in the chilly air. What I found was disturbing. The attic was filled with old photographs, scattered haphazardly on the floor. They were Polaroids, faded and yellowed with age, but the images were unmistakable. They showed people in various states of distress, tied up, gagged, and clearly terrified. My stomach churned as I realized these were not just ordinary photographs. They were evidence of something horrific. In the corner of the attic, I found a makeshift shrine. There were mason jars filled with a dark, dried substance that could have been blood, though it was hard to tell with the dim light. A rusty old knife lay nearby, along with more Polaroids, these more graphic than the others. The The entire scene felt wrong, like I had stumbled into a place where something evil had occurred. I fled the attic, sealing the hatch behind me. The whispers that night were louder, more insistent, as if they were trying to communicate something. I didn't sleep, too disturbed by what I had seen. The next morning, I called the landlord, demanding answers. He was evasive, only saying that the previous tenants had left in a hurry and that the attic was supposed to be off limits. I didn't stay to find out more. I packed my things and left that day, unable to bear the thought of sleeping in that apartment another night. I couldn't shake the images from my mind, the tortured faces in the Polaroids, the eerie shrine. I reported my findings to the police, but I never heard back about what, if anything, they discovered. To this day, I wonder what happened in that attic and who the people in those photographs were. I've since moved far away, but the memories linger, a dark shadow over my life. I'll never forget the feeling of cold dread that washed over me in that attic, nor the sense that something malevolent still lingered there, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. I moved into a new apartment in a freshly built complex, expecting modern conveniences and a comfortable living experience. My unit was on the second floor, overlooking a small garden courtyard. Everything seemed perfect at first, clean, spacious, and well insulated. But soon, I started noticing something strange. No matter how high I set the thermostat, the apartment always felt cold. I could hear the heat running, and warm air would come out of the vents, but the temperature never seemed to rise above 55 degrees Fahrenheit. I tried everything: blankets, space heaters, even weatherproofing the windows. But nothing worked. The chill seemed to seep from the walls themselves. I contacted maintenance multiple times, but they couldn't find anything wrong. The heating system was functioning perfectly, they said, and there was no reason for the apartment to be so cold. They checked the ducts, the vents, even the insulation, but everything was in order. Still, the cold persisted. The coldness wasn't just a physical sensation. It felt almost oppressive, like the air was heavier than it should be. I started feeling constantly tired and on edge, unable to relax or get warm no matter what I did. I even invited friends over to see if they felt the same, and they did. Everyone commented on how unnaturally cold the place felt, even though the heaters were on full blast. One night, after another fruitless visit from the maintenance team, I decided to do some research. I found an old news article about the land the complex was built on. It turned out that the site had once housed an old orphanage, which had burned down in the early 1900s. Several children had died in the fire, and the building had been left abandoned for decades before being demolished to make way for the new apartments. The thought of those lost children, their spirits perhaps lingering, sent a chill down my spine. The coldness of the apartment suddenly felt more sinister, like it was tied to something beyond a mere malfunction. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the cold was more than just a temperature issue. In the end, I decided to move out. The cold was unbearable, and I couldn't live like that anymore. The landlord seemed indifferent, offering no explanations or apologies. I left, leaving behind the strange, cold apartment and whatever might be causing its inexplicable chill. I still think about that place sometimes, especially on cold winter nights. I wonder if the new tenants feel the same chill, if if they too are puzzled by the cold air that seems to come from nowhere. I never found a definitive answer, but I can't help but feel that the cold was a message, a lingering reminder of something or someone long gone, still reaching out from the past. I moved into my new apartment, super stoked. It was modern, spacious, and perfect for working from home. The internet was fast, and I had a dedicated office space with a view of the city. Everything was going smoothly until my video meetings started to get strange. It began with little comments from colleagues during Zoom calls. They'd ask things like, "Is your sister there?" Or, "Who was that in the background?" At first, I thought they were joking or mistaken, since I lived alone and had no visitors. But the questions kept coming, and they seemed genuinely curious. I started paying more attention, watching the recordings of my meetings. I never saw anyone or anything unusual, just me in my office. Yet, people kept asking about someone else, describing a young woman who would appear briefly behind me. They said she had dark hair and seemed to be casually walking by, often out of focus, as if she was just passing through. The idea was unsettling. I began checking my apartment before and after meetings, making sure I was truly alone. But no matter what, the comments continued. It was always the same, colleagues mentioning the girl or asking who was in the room with me. I didn't know what to make of it. I had no sister, and I couldn't see anything unusual in the recordings. I started feeling paranoid, constantly glancing over my shoulder during calls. There was never anyone there. I even tried changing the position of my camera, thinking it might be catching a reflection or something from outside, but it made no difference. The questions kept coming, and they were all eerily consistent. One day, after another meeting where someone asked about the girl, I decided to review all my recordings from the past few weeks. It was tedious, but I was determined to find out what everyone else was seeing. As I went through the footage, I saw it. Just a brief flicker in the background. A girl walking past, out of focus, but clearly there. She never looked at the camera, just walked by and disappeared out of frame. I froze, rewinding the footage and watching it over and over. There was no explanation for it. I had never seen anyone enter or leave my apartment, and the door was always locked. Yet there she was, appearing in the background, uninvited and unexplained. I felt a creeping sense of unease. Who was this girl? And how was she appearing in my apartment? I asked the building management if they had any history of strange occurrences, but they assured me there was nothing unusual. I even considered getting the place blessed, but I felt ridiculous. I couldn't explain it to anyone without sounding crazy. In the end, I decided to ignore it as best I could. I kept the footage to myself, not wanting to fuel any more speculation from my colleagues. I moved out a few months later, more out of convenience than fear, but the mystery of the girl has never left me. Even now, I sometimes wonder if she was real, a ghost, or something else entirely. I never found an explanation, and the thought of her still sends chills down my spine. The apartment has new tenants now, and part of me wonders if they ever see her too, walking silently behind them, unseen and unexplained.